Hello and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a podcast where we talk about some Dungeons and Dragons and how you can fit it into your role-playing campaigns. This week, as ever, is Fiona with me as my co-host. That's right.
This week as ever, yes.
As ever, this week as ever, as Fiona as my co-host. But not as ever. There is, sometimes probably wish as ever, we have the wonderful, the magnificent, the enigmatic Jimmy Flowers of Splinterverse.
Woohoo!
You can do all my intros. That was epic.
See, one take wonder, Hamilton.
Yeah, and I'm Hamilton, by the way.
Yeah, you didn't mention yourself.
The other one, but don't worry about it.
We're delighted to have Jimmy guesting with us because we've covered a couple of Splinterverse's works as well. So, Jimmy, it is a delight to have you on this podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I love your show. You know, I'm all about D&D books, and you guys are where it's at. So, getting to spend time with you is exciting.
Oh, that's very kind. And we'll send you the money for that.
Yes, exactly.
So my first sort of little warm-up question for you, Jimmy, is like, well, how did you get into role-playing games in general, but also how did you get into starting to write your own content for role-playing games?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I mean, when I was a child, I was kind of a loner, just a lot due to circumstance. And so I would spend a lot of time in my room looking at comics, and, you know, we'd go to the mall and I would see these really cool red and blue boxes that had like the basic sets. And so I'd get those and I would open those and just draw graph paper maps of things and create characters using the NPC forms and stuff like that. Never got to play with these ones when I was a kid because I was such a loner, but it was just exciting to get into it with my imagination. And then just over the years, you know, I went to school for English and with a focus, you know, on writing and editing. And that was my thing. And I went into publishing and then eventually left that when I realized that, you know, it was sort of dying due to the internet. And then when the pandemic came around, I thought, you know, I need some hobbies I can do at home. And, you know, I was like, what did I used to do that maybe was more homebound? And I went back to D&D, and then I was noticing all of this third-party content. And I thought, well, I can do that. You know, I've worked in publishing and you know, I love writing, and it kind of touches on a lot of things that I like to do. So why not? And here we are.
So when you got back into it in the pandemic, obviously you said you were into writing. Was it just like, did you start out with just, I'll just do a little class? What was the first thing that sort of like you put your hand to when it came to it? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually started on a setting that hasn't been released yet, but yes. And I was way into it. I have a ton of it written actually, but I was like, you know, I can't just go straight to a setting because people will be like, who is this guy?
Who is this random man on the internet?
Yeah, who does he think he is? You know, unless I'm going to give it away or something. So I just scaled back and started thinking, well, what could I do with the budget I have and, you know, the art I can find and all of that stuff. So I started smaller with a race and a couple subclasses and stuff. And but that campaign setting's still there, and I'm going to get back to it. And it's exciting. It's like a setting you've never seen before. So
I'm
excited.
Whoa, look at that teaser already.
Yeah. This is good. We're getting all the scoops. We're getting all the scoops straight away. I got into doing some DM skill thing, and I think it's quite scary at first. And I think a lot of people do go, I'm going to build a world. I'm going to redefine the universe of D&D. But then you suddenly go, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And go, I'll do a subclass. That'll be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll do a dungeon, you know, I'll do this. Yeah. Magic item or something. Yeah.
With your publishing background, did you find the layout and all the other sort of other tasks that go with, because making a D&D product is not just, as you, I know I'm telling you things you know, Jimmy, but this is for the people at home, and they probably all know this as well. Yeah, it's not just like making that text, it's all the other stuff that goes with it. And do you have those skills yourself, or did you have to use the home brewery? How did you work through that in the first instance, like joining it?
So I spent a number of years in publishing. So I was fortunate enough to get to do some layout there. So I got familiar with InDesign and things like that. And then the sort of next path I took after publishing was marketing. So then I got into how do you market things? How do you write press releases and all that stuff? So it's almost like all the different parts of my journey have led me to this place to where I can create Splinterverse Media and kind of combine all of these experiences into this new creation.
We sort of came across your work initially thanks to Hamilton, because when we first started doing DM's Book of season 3, when we were doing some streams and stuff, we did Wild Beyond the Witchlight, and then the next week Hamilton was like, I found something that will continue our passion for it. And I just found that interesting that quite a number of your publications, first of all, there's a lot, which is amazing. But they're obviously linked to current Wizard of the Coast stuff coming out. So obviously you had the Feywild Companion, you've had your own sort of Fizzbands sort of compendium, and then you've recently had the Dragonlance Companion out. How do you turn that around? Because you must get like, you must be like, oh, Dragonlance is coming, and you might have 4 months, and how do you go from like, that's cool, and then 4 months later, you're like, in the same week or the 2 weeks later from the initial release, it's like, and here's a companion, and you're like, oh my god, that's 200 pages of new content.
Yeah. Both me and Fiona sit here going, the organization. I don't know how you do it. It freaks me out thinking about it.
We can't even do a podcast normally. So.
It requires a lot of discipline. And, this is something, having worked years in these industries that thankfully have developed. But as far as like timing, I mean, I look at what Wizards is putting out, and then my editor, Matt, that I work with on all the books, they consult with me, and we look at what exactly is Wizards going to release. Is it an adventure book with a little bit of player options? Is it a full campaign setting? What is it? So for example, we didn't do Spelljammer because we saw that the box set was going to have a little bit of everything. And we thought, okay, there really isn't a place for us to add anything. I mean, we would just be competing with what's in that book. Whereas with Dragonlance, we saw that there was only going to be, the one subclass, and, it wasn't going to have everything. It wasn't going to be a full smorgasbord of options for players. It wasn't going to have all the other things that you would want to do. And even with some of the new stuff, like the backgrounds that they did, they only had 2. So we thought, well, it'd be nice to have a few more like that, so that if you want to use that style of background, and then some people are on the old style, you could presumably say, well, we have 4 choices now. And so it's a little better to give everybody that style of a background compared to just the 2 from the official book. So it just kind of depends on what they're up to. But we literally started open call for writers the day after they announced their slate, which we were so grateful that they announced the slate, because then we could start planning well in advance. And we had been noodling on some things, and we kind of knew it was coming, because if you look at the UAs, you can kind of see where they're headed, you can guess. But it was really the announcement where we started speaking about it openly and doing the open calls.
Personally, and I don't know if this is all D&D, but more content's always good. Do you know what I mean? And I'm always with you. It's like, I only like 4 subclasses. I need 2 backgrounds. Come on, Wizards, you're being too stingy. And then I was just thinking your Fizzbands one, and like, you've got 13 subclasses and 2 backgrounds on top. And then the chromatic cone, I love that, by the way, extra spells. And that's what's it's so great about the DM's Guild and all the sort of community stuff like that, is that you can just get more. But obviously, and everyone's is good, but yours is really, really good. It's like, yours are really good. And they feel like, when we did the Feywild Companion, I think we just both sat there and went, this, the additional stuff you're getting is at the same level.
And to follow on, because Wild Beyond the Witch, it's a similar sort of thing. It was like an adventure, but it was the first time the Feywild has sort of been like, we're going to do our own thing. And then they had like their Domains of Delight thing, like here's what you can do. And yet within your Feywild Companion, obviously you had your monsters and stuff, but you had like whole adventures and like places in Feywild stuff. And we were like, like a whole Domain of Delight. I think what was really nice about it, and again, it probably is down to the timing as well as obviously the quality of work. You ride that sort of high of like, oh, cool, a new book. Oh man, more stuff.
Yes, exactly.
And you just keep that passion, and like, so I mean, I've still yet to run anything Wild Beyond the Witchlight, but I'm always like, the Butterfly Queen was really cool. This was very cool, and was it the different flowers that you can take for making stuff?
Oh, the Domain of Might, it's gone out of my head because I've got so many
Dualis.
Dualis. It's like it's duality, but it's Dualis. That's it. The idea
that's
when you turn up and then your alter ego, your mimic, your sort of evil twin arrives.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful. Many like layers. It's beautiful. But it's the other things that you do in them that I always think I like about the Matt Mercer documents. We looked at both of the Critical Role ones, and also another one of our favorites, which was Minsk and Booze, which was like the adventure hooks and just like the little bits of extra stuff that I think actually I feel like Wizards doesn't do enough of. That's really great. There's just like, here DM, here's like, as you've got like 56 in the Feywild adventure hooks. That's manna from heaven for DMs, isn't it? Because you just need those little bits to push you down the road that then leads you to a whole adventure. But it's those things that are really key.
Yeah, like side missions and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The adventure hooks, I mean, those came about from just thinking about the layout and thinking how I wanted to do it. Because a lot of people, they flow the text from page to page. I try to separate the text as best I can so you can really focus when you're on a page.
Yep.
And then you end up with some white space. And rather than saying, oh no, I'm not going to write anymore because, you know, all of that's done, I say, okay, no, I can write some adventure hooks. I can fill in some of this white space and give more value. We just don't know if you're going to pick up a Splinterverse book and then not like it and never pick up another one.
Sure.
So to me, any place that I can give you value, I'm going to try to do it because I want you to say, every time I buy a Splinterverse book, it's worth the money, it's reasonably priced, and I get value out of it. And so it's not a question when the next one comes out, it's going to be on my wish list. And so that's kind of a motivator for me when I'm working on white space and what we can do. And we've added stuff to books just to avoid, you know, having big gaps because we just really want you to be able to focus on the text and not have this sort of flow. We do flow a little bit, but it's not as common as you see in other books.
Sure. Now, I love that focusing on certain things, because I definitely get to a point where this chapter's too long. My brain can't take it. And so, to have stuff like here is just literally 2 pages and every part of it counts.
When you're in the middle of DMing, I mean, a bunch of stuff on the page can be a distraction, but if the page is really focused on just a creature, for example, then you can just hone in on that page. You don't lose your place. You don't have to look, oh, where is it? I can't find it. It's right there, you know?
Yeah, because I had that problem all the time as a GM. I'm like, just give me 2 minutes. Where is it? I had my mark here, and it's no longer there.
We skipped over, and I kind of wanted to go back a step, if that's okay. I know we're going deep into it. Going on the organization, you said you started out, like you came to it, this is what's something I can do during the pandemic, working from home. How do you go from that to media enterprise as Splinterverse? Like how's that journey come about? I imagine it's going to involve a lot of community benefit, but it's really interesting to hear people's stories on how it went from you in your room to the multiple people you have working on these things.
But also all in their rooms as well, I think.
I guess, you know, I was recording this video game called Hex, and I was putting that on YouTube and playing that just as something to do during the pandemic. And then that game decided to shut down. And so I thought, okay, I have to repurpose my channel. I have to find, you know, I just built this channel. I now have to change directions. And I had been doing the D&D stuff as well. And I thought, well, what if I orient my channel towards books? Because I just have such a passion for looking at books. And also I'm making them. So combining those two things together would be really good. And it's just been fun to meet so many people in the community when I talk about their books each week or whatever. It's just fun. And it's a great way to get the word out about what's coming out, because it's so easy. There's so many titles coming out. It's really hard to keep up with those. But then as far as the other side of Splinterverse Media, the people working with me, that's just been one step at a time. Each book, you know, I've met new people, networked, found people to bring on to the team to work as either an artist or a writer or an editor or whatever. And just, you know, keeping those relationships alive and bringing back people for future projects, you know, when it works out. Yeah, just building up the whole, what I call the Splinterverse, you know, it's this universe of people working together.
It is, because you look at your DM's Guild pages and it's like authors, artists,
like, scroll.
It even has plus more, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and you click that, and then it takes you to a whole thing of like all these people. It's amazing, and it's just it's the thing that I'm as much impressed by is the level of organization and like that goes through making all these things.
Yeah, like on your YouTube channel, you do like a weekly sort of like, here's the new releases and stuff. When you're looking for the new releases, I know obviously you said you can't cover everything. What draws your eye? What makes you excited when you see a new release? Is there like good things that you're like, oh, I want to talk about this because of X? Is there anything that you look out for?
Yeah, I mean, I really do look for, you know, anything as a customer, something that grabs me, a hook, you know, some unique take on something, an interesting concept, hopefully something visual. I mean, it is a visual medium. So sometimes, you know, if it looks like somebody just put a Word document up there, it's hard for me to put that in front of the audience because I need at least some artwork. So there's like a list of criteria that I officially use, but I'm always just looking for unique takes on it. And I really try to talk about how I would use the book or different ways that I
Yeah.
would use the book. And especially if I can find ways that I think are multi-purpose, like, oh, it's meant to be for the Shadowfell, but here's this table in here that you can take out and use in any dungeon or what, like pointing those things out and trying to be almost like the QVC or HSN or shopping network for these people, right? Because I'm one of those people that's making books, and I know how hard it is to get people hyped up, interested in these third-party products. So I'm just anything that I can find to latch onto, because sometimes people will put up a catalog page, they're so exhausted from making their book that they don't write anything, and then the preview only shows the table of contents, and it's like, well, I can't really do much with that. I'd love to, but so in a way that's good, because it would be much harder for me to eliminate and weed down and get the lineup that I do each week. But yeah, so there's little things that jump out.
That speaks to me so much as someone who creates educational content at work, me having to tell various academics going, no, this is not right. Hamilton's already heard my rant about great PowerPoint presentations in the last couple of days. So I totally see that. But having something that's eye-catching and keep giving it like a good, concise description of what your product is, like, because I think that's what, again, if anyone here hasn't seen a Splinterverse book or PDF, going to your entry on Drive-Thru RPG or DM's Guild and seeing how much information there is, like if you're not sure, it's like it's there open to me. You've got your obviously your full-size preview and stuff, but the fact you've got it all there, and like obviously usually reviews and stuff like that as well, it is so vast. Oh, that's exciting. So
you just don't know what's going to speak to people. So I always encourage people from the Marketing Academy says appeal to them emotionally and appeal to them logically, because people are usually more one or the other or a blend. So if you have in your catalog copy some of both of those things, the likelihood you're going to hook them and draw them in is better. And people, I know it's exhausting to put these books together, but what makes me sad is to see people create these 73-page monstrosities and then put nothing on their page. And I'm like, no, that's the point at which you've really got to put your stuff in there, because if you don't grab them on that page, they're not going to walk through the door into your shop. Your cover can only do so much.
It is so true, but it is hard. As you said, you get your 70 pages deep and it's like more, but it is the most important. It's those last 10% that's the most important part, isn't
agreed.
it? So,
and you might need to take a break or recruit some help for that part, but don't neglect it.
The other thing I was going to say, so obviously we talked about like the Farewell Companion, the Dragonlance, and Fizzbands and stuff like that, but your other sort of the two that I saw, like Potions Unlocked and Swarms of the Multiverse, they're very interesting, and I just wanted to point it out because, again, this is what I love about third-party content, is that there'll be stuff out there that I have not considered, such as potions, such as what can we do with a swarm, which is something I'm always like, for me as just a sort of GM, I'll put a swarm in, it just takes down hit points stuff. Swarms of the Multiverse, such an interesting book.
Thank you.
For me, it was what an interesting concept, like having this idea of like have a monster and then adding a swarm to it and then sort of mix and matching, creating your own. And here's some examples, and obviously so many examples, like the example of like alchemic ooze and then the alchemic horde as it takes on all these coins and stuff like that. I was like, holy shit, I want to, yes why not, yes to more swarms is what I want to say. So I like how it's not just like, if you aren't excited about the next adventure, if you're not excited about Dragonlance or anything like that, that's totally fine, because suddenly there's like a book of 150 pages all about swarms or all about potions, and I'm like, I did not know I needed that until right now.
Yeah, that to me is where we get to be the most creative. It's our Unlocked series, where we take an aspect of D&D that we feel is maybe neglected or overlooked and really just try to bring some method to the madness. It's like, okay, I'm taking a healing potion, great, update your score, your points or whatever. It's like, it can be so much more than that. You can build a whole campaign around potions. You can build a whole campaign around swarms, and really what we're doing by focusing on that one aspect is we're sort of harnessing that creativity, because we're saying, okay, let's make it sort of an artificial barrier that says everything we're doing has to do with swarms or potions right now. What are the thoughts that are coming to our heads? What are the things that we want to try to achieve, or the questions that we want to answer? And so when you really can just shine a spotlight on something like that and just dive deep and just stay so focused, you end up with books that are, over 100 pages and just make people think about something they've been engaging with for years in a totally new way. And then at the same time, try to give them the tools to make their own. It's just super rewarding. And it's my favorite stuff to do with Splinterverse because it's just a gift that keeps on giving. I mean, we've got instructions in there to make your own swarms. And then we've got all these examples. And it's not just, oh, here's a stat block and then here's the swarm. We explain why are they becoming a swarm? And there's so many reasons. It could be that they want to make a hive mind. It could be that they're stronger when they're together. It could be that they get a new ability, right? And so just going down that road takes you right into story, right? And it's my favorite. I love doing it.
No, I love it. And it fits with my, like, I always have this theory, and it comes from like my architecture training, is like you give 20 million people 1 square foot, you'll get 20 million completely different, crazy, insane ideas. But it doesn't take, if you can focus on something smaller and smaller and smaller, you will weirdly find more and more in it. Do you know what I mean? It's like the idea as well that you'll find as many bugs in your back garden as you'll find in the Amazon rainforest. You know, like there's always that thing, you know, if you look at the Amazon rainforest as one person, you will find just as much as one person will find looking in your back garden. And the swarms one is a really great one because I never played 4E, but people always talk about the things. So when about a year ago, or maybe 2 years, on Twitter, there was quite a big push about like why 4E isn't like always that bad. And I remember people talking about like swarms in that, and minions, I think it might have been called, or there might be a different term, but like 1 hit point NPCs or things to sort of monster stats and stuff like that kind of attack you, and you can kind of interact with them, and the warlord trait allowed people to sort of manipulate them in a really interesting way. I suppose I never played it, so I don't know, but that's something that is really missing from D&D. I've got these, you know, I want that movie moment of the, you know, of hundreds of skulls coming at me.
You want that bit in The Mummy Returns, where they what's that coming over the
exactly,
away.
All the scarabs,
this horde of creatures coming at you.
It's so cool, and it's such a great, and it really mechanically as well, just from the game perspective, just completely changes combat, which is always a good thing to up and refresh that part of the game. So
and I'm just going to agree with Hamilton on that. I think exactly that is such a small thing, both the potion stuff and the swarm stuff, but then the fact you look at it so much and you're like, actually this is going to affect and change everything about it. And so you might only need to drop it in to a big boss battle that has environmental swarms, etc., but then it's just like, oh, but they have to change everything about it, and it just makes it so much more exciting and interesting both for players and for GMs. So I bookmarked quite a few things on the swarm list. Soon they will have my swarm one shots. Soon.
Yes, and that's the beauty of it, is that we can inspire you. It's like a collaboration. Even though we're not sitting there with you, you're engaging our work, and it's triggering all these thoughts and images in your head of one shots you can build or situations you can put your characters in, whether it's a whole campaign or just one encounter. It doesn't matter. It's just that we want you to have that creativity trigger. And it's so exciting to see.
With that then, and sort of with this Unlock series, can we get a sneak peek of what the next one is?
If there is one.
If there is one.
There is one, and it's massive. It's something that you interact with all the time in D&D, and you probably don't think about it, but if we get to do it, it's a Kickstarter we're preparing, and it would be kind of a setting within a setting. Very, very exciting. I wish I could give details.
No.
You
can't. That's fine.
But we're waiting to see what happens with the OGL before we can move forward. But the artwork is coming in already for some of it. And it's something I've dreamed of doing for a long time. And it's not the setting I started on that I told you about. That's after
as a separate one. Oh my God.
Yes, both of these I think would be just blow your mind, because there are things that I'm surprised haven't been done because they just seem like they need to be done.
Okay.
Well, we are officially excited. Yeah, we're officially excited. Well, speaking of OGL, we can't. It's one of those things where we're talking to absolutely an amazing third-party content creator. We can't not talk about OGL. So obviously at the time of this recording, there's been a lot of discourse going on about the OGL license and with One D&D, and a lot of things about leaks and stuff like that. For you, Jimmy, looking at the open gaming license, obviously that has helped you create your work, obviously, and make profits, and well deserved for you and your team. I mean, it's obvious, really. Like, if such a license is to go away, then I guess that's kind of it. Or would you look to doing other systems at all, or just keep putting out content in some way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scenarios. I mean, it just depends on what actually transpires. There's been some leaks and we're not sure what's going to happen. My hope is that the OGL continues. Swarms of the Multiverse and Potions Unlocked, those would not have existed without the OGL. And,
Agreed.
it's not just me. I mean, I'm hiring artists and writers and editors and things. So there's a lot of people that are, being sustained from the ability to create tangential content to Dungeons and Dragons, because that's a big name. And to me, it amplifies D&D, it amplifies
100%.
Wizards of the Coast. Every book that comes out that is related to it is an advertisement. Every video, every podcast is an advertisement for that game. You need the player's handbook. You need
Sells
the Dungeon
that
Master's
starter
Guide, right? So to me, it's a nice symbiotic relationship, and I hope it can continue. And I hope for all the people that I've worked with on these projects that it can continue, but we just don't know. I mean, I'm definitely going to see what happens. And I have a couple of thoughts in my mind about where we would go. I'm happy to hear that there's other systems being developed because, we could end up going that route. I'd love to say I've developed my own system, but I feel like there's so many being developed by big players that it's just going to be
a step back.
overcrowded with that. And so we'll see. But, for anybody listening, it is really a critical piece of what we do. And a lot of people changed career paths. They took control of their lives in this pandemic. And part of that was because something like the OGL existed, and it gave them that opportunity to strike out on their own. So when you take away opportunities like that, it's really sad. So I'm hoping that it works out for the best, but time will tell.
And I think what's interesting is that some of the discourse I saw where people are like, I don't see, it doesn't affect me, I don't use third-party content. And I'm like, you do. I think everyone I've ever talked to about D&D has either homebrewed their stuff and put it on stuff like DM's Guild, or have used stuff like that. And certainly stuff like published Wizards of the Coast stuff like Radiant Citadel, Candlekeep Mysteries. Obviously, those writers came from a community who put out third-party content. So it's that sort of thing where I do feel like people maybe aren't aware of it. And it's something that I'm quite glad that we are having this discourse about it, because it is so important that something like this is discussed. And again, fingers crossed for the best result on it. And I hope that I mean, like we've Hamilton, I know you've been creating content for systems like Morkborg, have these open licenses already, and they're like, is that sort of thing where it's such an encouraging thing that people want the other RPGs do want people to create content for them, and it's just very interesting to see the impact on that on the community. So I definitely hope that more people are suddenly aware that this third-party content helps all of us. It's not, you might say you don't use it. I think everyone has used some degree of third-party content, whether they know about it or not.
Well, also thinking about like the idea that you're going to step up and do something, when you can lean on a well-known thing like Dungeons and Dragons or even Morkborg to make it not like such a scary thing.
Agreed.
As I'm going to just write the great American novel by myself, nobody's heard of me, right? The difference between those two things, I think, gives people the opportunity to stretch into something new, and then maybe eventually branch out on their own and write the great American novel. But they need a place to start that feels safe and familiar. And so 100%. These licenses are great for that.
But you see, now I've got the image of Mark Twain doing an open license for his books, and everyone using his, or like Jane Austen or something like that. Now, all writers need to do their own licenses to use their works and themes. We have stuff like Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies, and all that sort of thing.
Well, because the license is now open.
There you go.
It's that long enough. What systems have you worked in other than D&D, Jimmy? Because obviously that's the big one. But
I haven't really. I mean, I've watched streams of Vampire the Masquerade. I've watched streams of other systems, but I really haven't. I mean, I barely get to play these days because I'm just constantly, working on projects, right? So it'll be interesting. I've been with this news of the OGL. I've been watching a lot of videos. I watched a video on the Cypher system the other day, and the Fence system,
very good system.
Shadows of the Demon Lord, and like I'm learning some other systems just kind of during this weird limbo that we're in right now.
Is there a particular system that you would like to write for?
Irrespective of anything.
Or genre, because obviously I know currently a lot of the stuff you have been doing has been the sort of D&D focus or high fantasy focus. Would you want to do something else?
I think someday I want to do something sci-fi because I do like the sci-fi genre a lot. As far as systems, I get frustrated with systems because I feel like they're like they handcuff your imagination. So I
Oh,
will,
cool.
come up with sort of like something I want to happen, and then I'll talk about it, and people will say, "Oh, well, that's impossible in D&D because of the action economy," or whatever. And
All
it's
right.
like,
Yeah.
why are we so limited? And a lot of times, if you look at the stuff that I'm writing,
Yeah.
I'm pushing it because I
Agreed.
really want to
Yeah.
take the mechanics to another level and to not be so limited by them. And so sometimes I'm just experimenting. The Lost Book, I was like, what would happen if you have to use a D20 in your stat block to determine what action the creature does? It's just experimenting with these things because I feel so held back by mechanics sometimes. But I have people there to keep me in line so that you're not
Yeah.
cursing me, right? They've definitely brought me back to reality, and we found a compromise, which is what you guys end up getting to read and then hopefully enjoying. But I like that. I like pushing the boundaries. So systems, I guess I would have to try them and see how I feel about them as a player. But as a writer, I'm scared of them because I'm like, it's going to box me in. But I'll do the same thing. I'll get people around me to help me free my mind, but then bring it back to a compromise spot where it works for everybody.
Well, I can only recommend Mortal because there's no compromise.
I know he was going to do that, but for me as a GM and a DM, because I humble brag, I've run quite a lot of systems, and I find it really interesting when you say people like, oh, you can't do that because of this. I've got to that point now going, oh, that sounds fun. Do it.
Exactly.
I don't.
That's it,
the less work I have to do as a GM, but I find it's really interesting because it kind of is freeing to be like, I'm just going to do it like this. If you've got a problem with it, we can talk it out. But at the end of the day, what I say sort of goes. But I want the best for the players. It's not like this is my game. I'm going to do fingers temple, that sort of thing. So I find that interesting how like people say, oh, it doesn't work in this system, and I would just be like, nah, it works for my game. So whatever.
And I mean the changes aren't crazy. Sometimes we shift to using a different mechanic, or there's maybe been one thing that I've had to throw out completely, but most things we find a way to make it work that I feel like still represents the vision I had. And sometimes I'm just saying, well, like, what is in these books that's not even getting used? Like provinces for deities. When I wrote the warlock subclass for Dragonlance Companion, I was like, let's put in a feature that connects to these provinces, because I never see them used other than as a reference. And it's kind of like a ribbon ability, but still it's a way of bringing life to something that is just sitting there neglected. It's fun for me to look for these little Easter eggs that we can unearth.
But I understand it though, because I think when like our background is creating content, not I do make stuff on DM Skill, but when I've ventured into those worlds, particularly like Mortal is different because you do what you like, but the D&D, there definitely is a want for the printed material to feel like a certain way and fit within the mechanics. Like I remember when I created my first set of races for this sort of Cosmic Ganassi. And the first time I put that out there and I put it on Reddit, oh my gosh, it was like, can't do that. You've got too many abilities and it's so overpowered and you're doing too much. And I'm like, yeah, but so
why? Like,
and I did, I did definitely, because it was my first sort of foray, I did pull them back a bit, but I still kept them a bit more into this. They had sort of spells that they got because they're kind of like related to their sort of cosmic background. And surprise, now you can do that in D&D. You can get like, you can have character creations. So I was ahead of the game. But my point is, like, at the time, you were like, you can't do that. That's not D&D. And so I do feel that there is more of a pressure on content creators of physical books to fit within a sort of mechanic base, rather than when you're being a DM on a stream and just going like, can I like amplify this by using the Spelljammer to make my like area of effect huge? Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can.
Why wouldn't you?
Why not? Yeah, exactly. It makes sense logically in my mind, like D&D logic. So, but you couldn't write that in a book so much. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you could. But...
Well, and I think the size of the big books that we do, it gives us that opportunity to have some things that maybe push the boundaries a little bit and make you go, and then we have some more expected stuff. Like, to me, the perfect book is a mixture of the expected and the unexpected, because 100%. Then you have all these things. And really, what book, unless it's an adventure where you're running through a sequence of things, what book do you use literally every single thing in the whole book?
Agreed.
You don't, even Wizards books, right? So if we give you such a vast assortment that you walk away and are using a significant amount of it and you feel like enough to justify buying it, that's a win.
Agreed.
100%.
It's so true. The amount of people that go, I've not read the DM's guide, and I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
But again, just jumping off what you said, Hamilton, they've been doing quite a few streams of also Dimension 20 did a stream of The Good Society, an RPG which is Jane Austen inspired. And no a spoiler here, there's no dice rolling in it. It's just pure conversations and tokens. But because they felt like, but it still has to be D&D, they still latched on D&D, and it was very interesting because I've recently got that RPG, and it's just like they felt they couldn't do that RPG. So there's an expectation of like, well, you do D&D, so you have to do that. So I just thought that was really interesting that even if we're exploring other things, if you're not used to a different system, they're like, well, let's add in a D20 in somewhere, and roll a Constitution saving throw, I guess. You're like, oh.
But we've started saying it a lot, Fiona, both of us on our show, of like when we're talking about something in D&D, we don't like this. Well, we don't have to use it.
You're not tied to it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't like that. Like when we're doing the 1 D&D and there's a few changes to things, we're like, yeah, it's cool. I love all this bit, but I'm not too keen on this bit. I'm not going to use it. And you don't have to use it. And it's so liberating, but it takes a while to get your head in that space, I think. So you usually go through a very big publicity through then into DM's Guild as your primary focus. I'm correct there, Jimmy, I think.
Yes. Yeah. We've done 2 outside of DM's Guild, but the rest have all been through there.
But you mentioned that this next one you're looking to go down the Kickstarter route. And I was just wondering, like, what's the change for that? Why you think that's the model you want to go down, and sort of how you went through that process? I'm just using you as the sort of like very great example of to this like big level of, from individual in a room to a big level sort of production, and how you've made those decisions is always interesting. So why the Kickstarter sort of move in this one?
It's an evolution. I mean, again, I could have come out of the gate doing a Kickstarter, but people would have been like, well, who is this person? Who is Splinterverse Media, right?
Yeah.
And so as much as I've enjoyed doing stuff on DM's Guild, it really needs to be, as a business, diversified. And we have different ways of getting products out there and to develop some of our own IP. I mean, the Swarms of the Multiverse, the Potions Unlocked, everything in there, I own as part of the company. So if we want to do novels about the characters or other, move them to other systems, I have that opportunity. Whereas with the DM's Guild, once you published it, you kind of lose control of those things. So as much as I love Dualis and the Butterfly Queen, those creations of mine I no longer own them. So there's that balance. And then also financially, I mean, I have a certain standard for the books. I want them to feel like, Wizards, or at least a professional level publisher, put them out. And so when you want to make it look that good and feel that good, there's a lot of upfront cost. And so you're taking a calculated risk publishing something like that on the DM's Guild, that you're going to make your money back. With Kickstarter, you can do some upfront spending because you do have to do promotion. You do have to make it look like you're worth funding, right? But you can hold back and say, okay, well, I might do a bunch of writing on my own time for this. I'm not necessarily going to pay for the art yet. I'm not necessarily going to pay for this editing yet, or this collaborative writing. And so you can kind of turn the gauges and financially have less of a risk. So it's a necessity if I want this to be a long-term business, because we don't know how long DM's Guild will be around, if it'll be around forever, and also the freedom to just create stuff and not worry about whether it's going to go away or not. I get so emotionally attached to the stuff I create.
Oh, understandably.
I'm creating all these demi-planes, and Swarms of the Multiverse, and I'm like, I would be so sad if I had to give the rights to those away. So it's a number of reasons, financial and creative.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. And just, it's because a lot of people go on the DM's Guild and aren't exactly aware of all the sort of things that you're actually integrating into it, which is kind of interesting. And also the fact that 50% goes to DM's Guild as well, straight off the back.
That's my money.
I want to buy more stuff on the DM's Guild with that money, so please just give me more of it. I think you're a very good example of just that process, and I think people could learn a lot just if people are interested in getting into this realm of creating content. If you can, you're a really good prime example of how to go about this in a really positive way.
Agreed.
So this show is just the let's say how amazing Jimmy is show.
Yeah, that's what happens with all of our guests, to be fair.
You guys are so kind.
Oh, it's all right. We'll you can pay us again. We'll get that invoice to you. But Jimmy, one of my final questions was, so because obviously you have a lot of guest writers or collaborations going on. If somebody wants to like pitch an idea to you or wants to write for your next stuff, like what do you look for in that? Can people do that? Is there a process that you go through when picking collaborators to write on your projects?
Yeah, so sometimes we have open calls. Other times I do what I call shoulder tap, where I think about what I'm trying to do and I just tap people on the shoulder that I worked with previously and say, oh, you'd be a perfect fit for this. So it just depends on the project. A lot of times the DMs Guild stuff, there's going to be people that have personal connections to the content. So those are more likely going to be the open call situations. People have a connection to Dragonlance or Feywild. And so it's going to be a good way for them to come up with a pitch. Sometimes with the OGL stuff, we don't want to really reveal what the content is. So it's more of a shoulder tap situation. So like for Swarms, I shoulder tap people and said, hey, let's sign an NDA. And then, you can write for this book. And so it just depends. But I would say, I try to be very responsive on social media. Feel free to reach out anywhere. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever, YouTube. I don't tend to take in a lot of like projects that are pitched just because I'm only one person and it's just really hard to juggle a ton of projects, and I have like a big pipeline of stuff I want to do. But I'm grateful to meet people, to network, to hear about them, and I'm happy for people to pitch when we have open calls and even just to say hi. I want to write with you someday or something. That's great. I mean, networking is critical.
Even though that you said it's gone from you in your room to being this big company, you're still in your room and you're like, no more, go away, go away. I shut the door, go away.
Eventually, I'll get to the end of the pipeline, maybe. But there was like 20 different book ideas I had just when I was spitballing in the beginning. So we'll see.
We all know that feeling.
We're both there going, oh, we've got all our other projects on.
I talked to Fiona the other day saying, okay, this year I've set my task of things I'm gonna do this year. I'm not gonna do the Hamilton. Here's 20 million things I want to do this year and do none. So it's gonna happen.
Yeah, I was going to say we've come to the end of our hour, Jimmy, and we're just basically gone. You're so cool. Tell us more about yourself. That's basically what this episode's going to be. But thank you so much, Jimmy, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise and passion. Interesting enough, DM's Book Club was also a lockdown project where I was like, I need to read my D&D books. I know I'm going to rope in somebody else to do it, and it's Hamilton currently. He's lasted this long, so that's all good. But it's interesting because at the beginning, I didn't think about third-party content myself. I was just like, we'll do the published ones, it's fine. And actually, thanks to Hamilton introducing your Feywild companion, I was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff out there that we need to cover and talk about. So it's been an absolute joy to talk to someone who's A, done a book we've read, and B, like is also equally passionate about creating third-party content and role-playing games in general. So thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me. I mean, I feel such a kinship to you guys because you do have such a passion for books. I mean, I just love books, even beyond D&D books. I mean, just books, period. I love them. And so every time I listen to you guys, it's just infectious. Your true passion shows for this. And
we can't handle the praise.
Stop. We're two British people like cowering on Zoom.
Well, you're one of my favorites, and I'm grateful you're out there, showing people that we should appreciate not just the content, but that these books exist because they are a treasure.
They really are. No, they really are. It's one of the things that like I'm so glad about coming back, because I even just enjoy reading the books. Like even if I'm never going to use them, even though I will, because I will read them and love them so much, I'll put them in my notebook. But it's just that there is a series that we did on going back on the Planescape and going back through all of the planes of existence and finding all my old 2E stuff and just reading it's been such fun just reading those worlds again. And it's I love it. So I'm glad people appreciate it. That's all. Yeah,
that's right. And so our final sort of send off, Jimmy, if you would say, where can we find your stuff?
Yes.
Where can we find you on social media if you want to be found? Where can we get your products? And any recommendations? Actually, this is my new one I'm doing. Is if it's an RPG, if it's a book you've seen recently on, say, DM's Guild or something like that, which could be like, oh my God, it's overwhelming.
Sure.
But yeah, so where can we find your stuff and any recommendations to sign us off on?
For sure. So I'm always looking for new Splinter friends. So, follow me at Splinterverse everywhere and go to splinterverse.com. That has kind of an overview of everything we're doing, but the more the merrier. Let's grow the universe and just enjoy each other's company. It's great. Yeah, I mean, there's so many creators. One that I always come back to that I like to recommend is the Eren Chronicles. That's EREN. They have a number of books on the DMs Guild, and they're just all so creative. They just did one about magic, and they have, I think one of their titles is Journey of the God Slayer, and they've got one dealing with spirits, and they're just all so creative that it's really a good one.
Brilliant. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes and be there to point that to as well.
Yes.
Well, quickly, Hamilton, because I know I have to leave in like 2 minutes. Hamilton, what are you up to, if anything?
What am I up to? I'm not doing a lot at the moment. There's still our Planescape show that's going on, which is on YouTube. You can find that Dragon. We've nearly done all 16 of them, so that's all very exciting. Also, you can vote for us on the.
It'll have ended by the time this has come out. Yes,
we got nominated for Morris's podcast.
We were nominated for best tabletop RPG podcast of 2022. Brackets talk.
Yes.
Congratulations.
I was saying to can I now say we're a nominated podcast? And Fiona's like, we were nominated on a website.
A random forum about RPGs.
I know it's not that random. It's still Morris. It's the big one.
It's still Morris's unofficial RPG podcast. So that's quite exciting. So yes, so we got nominated. We'll find out by the time this episode goes out. We'll find out if we've won. I don't think we have, but I had a lot of people message us saying, "Oh, congratulations!" And I was like, "Oh, that's people listen." So that was quite nice.
And then Bowie's and Spelljammer is coming out at some point. We are still recording. We had work that got in the way, but editing is happening in the background, and it will be coming soon. And I'm doing some more Borg stuff as usual. So
as usual, fair enough. For me, obviously I run Where. Where's what about it's What Am I Rolling podcast, which is a twice monthly RPG one shot podcast. As always, it's going very well. However, when this comes out, I think I'll be halfway through running an Alien campaign for Girls Run These Worlds. Streaming thing. It's very exciting. Awesome. It's quite daunting to the fact that because the call went out for casting and everyone was like, "Oh my god, a UK GM," and I was like, "Oh no, they mean me." Oh no, imposter syndrome and pressure. But yes, so that's coming out. So if you look up Girls Run These Worlds on Twitch, and it will be on YouTube as well. I will be there looking pretty much petrified with 5 other people who look very cool and doing stuff on the Alien. So that's going to be quite exciting. So please go check that out and go check out their other streams as well, because they've done lots of other RPGs. If you're interested in different kinds of one shots and different kinds of systems, I'd go to them, and they're a really cool company to work to.
They're really cool. 100%.
I love it.
Thanks, Jimmy.
You'll do great. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be really cool. It's gonna be really, really cool. Also, if you want to see Fiona playing Nice Marines, you can see that on what's the channel again?
It's called Christian's Brain.
Christian's Brain. Yes, it's very funny. It's very good, and I really enjoyed it. So go check that out.
Go check it out. Yes, go check it out. But unfortunately, we've come to the end. So thank you so much for listening, folks. And I hope you're enjoying 2023. Who knows what this will go out in March, knowing me.
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you so much, and we will see you
on the flip side. Take care. Bye. Bye.